Writer's Read by Litracey. Getting that book in children's hands.
Hi, I'm Tracey Grice and welcome to the Writer's Read podcast. One of the quotes that inspires me in my practice as a teacher, in fact it's the one that sits front and centre of my desk at school, is written by Nancy Atwell, an internationally acclaimed author, and she says that for students of every ability and background, it's the simple, miraculous act of reading a good book that turns them into readers. Because even for the least experienced, most reluctant reader, it's the one good book that changes everything. The job of adults who care about reading is to move heaven and earth to put that book into a child's hands. And that's why this podcast exists. Some children are really avid readers, they love books, they've got favourite authors and they can talk about books like it's their favourite thing to do. But for a huge number of students, reading can be challenging for a number of reasons. Maybe it's too hard, maybe they just haven't connected with the right series or author or genre. And I think Nancy's absolutely 100% right. When you get that book into a child's hands and watch them grow into a reader, it is miraculous. And one of the things I'm really passionate about in my work is getting that book into children's hands and helping them to fall in love with literature. When I have a child say, I don't like reading, I hate reading, you're never going to make me read, there's no books here that I like, it's a real challenge for me. And it's one that I let children know that, I'm not going to give up on them. I'm going to keep working with them until they find that book. And that is that miraculous moment for me when, it might take several terms, it might be quicker, but when they do find that book and then start to climb that reading ladder, now I've read this book, I've seen this other book by the same author, I'm going to read that one next, you know that they've found that path. I think the children work out that reading is a worthwhile thing to do beyond school. So this is something we can do in holidays, at night, when school finishes, that reading is a pleasurable thing to do and that, we can learn through reading, but we can also, there's so much enjoyment and pleasure that comes from reading. I had one student who said, you're never going to make me read, I hate reading. And it probably took about 3 terms. And it started with finding brochures from the local vet on cats because this student really liked cats. And he became really engaged with these brochures. And then that led into books that had cats in them, non-fiction books. And from there, through not just the work of myself, but from classmates who that he could see were also reading, he found his way into reading longer fiction and novels, and he's now the student who's reading under the desk when the teacher's teaching, and that one in particular was a fabulous moment. I had one of my managers at work say, you've changed the trajectory of that child's life forever, and that was a moment where I've gone, okay, my work's really important in getting that book in children's hands. And I think in the busyness of a school day, you are making sure children are, engaged, have books to read, have access to books, and you're modelling reading for them. So you're always sort of happy when that's done, but you don't often stop back to reflect and think, wow, this potentially has changed this child's life forever. So it's extremely rewarding. I never get tired of hearing stories when a parent comes in and says, I'm not sure what you're doing, but my child never used to read at home and now they're reading under the quilt with a torch. I can't get them to put a book down. And so even if their parent is not an avid reader, they're seeing the modelling almost from their child of how important reading is in their own life. Each podcast will feature a published author who is going to talk about their reading life, and they'll talk about their own reading strengths and struggles and really who they are as a reader, so that children can get an insight into the life of a proficient reader or an adult reader. And then what we're going to ask them to do is to read a portion of one of their books and then stop at the cliffhanger in the story in the hope that this may be the book that turns a child into a reader. When I first came up with the idea for this podcast, I wondered if any authors would be interested in talking to me about their reading life, because so often when I hear from an author, they're talking about themselves as a writer and their writing life and how to inspire young children to come up with ideas for their own stories. But I've been overwhelmed by the support that they've given me and that they truly understand the heart behind this podcast. It's about getting that book in children's hands, and their willingness to give up their time and speak to me has been really exciting. So I've had the opportunity to talk to Wendy Orr, who recently won the Prime Minister's Literature Award for her book Dragonfly Song, and here's a little bit about what she had to say.
Well, I did meet another author once who had a sort of plastic stand so that she could read in the shower, but
Wow.
I find that too difficult.
Adelaide's known as the festival state, and one of the festivals Adelaide hosts each year is Writers' Week. So Writers' Week is a really vibrant festival held in a park, and there's, both adults and children alike, and it's got a great vibe to it. And I got to sit down with award-winning author Sophie Laguna, and it was a great experience to sit in the park with Sophie and hear her read her book, Bird and Sugar Boy.
I found Birds, a field guide by A.P. Davies when I was 8. I was in the op shop with Dad because we needed something to make me look like a pineapple for the school concert, which was about the 5 food groups. Dad was looking for green clothes that could be the top of the pineapple. The other kids were getting their costumes sewn by their mothers, but Dad said if he couldn't find it at the op shop, it couldn't be found anywhere. And he'd fix the fuel lead, but he wasn't going to start bloody sewing.
I also met with local Adelaide author and illustrator Sally Heinrich, and I was really inspired by her story of how she found her way into reading and into books.
And it was just like the most amazing thing that had ever happened to me, I think, and then she let me loose and there were just shelves and shelves and shelves of all these books.
I'm really excited that we have Rebecca Bird joining us for our podcast. I've known Rebecca for many years, as she is my go-to girl for children's literature, and there's been countless times where I've been able to ring or email and say, Rebecca, I've got a student who will only read books about cars. What can you recommend? And she's got half a dozen titles up her sleeve at any time that she can recommend. And so she's, for me, a real expert in children's literature. She's my guru, and I'm really thrilled that she's going to be joining us on this podcast.
I have to be the person that reads everything, and I have to be able to know the books, and I have to be able to know, like Tracey, interviewing the authors, know which bits that I can read out loud that will engage them, that will want them to read that book. I trained as a junior primary teacher, so I always had books in the classroom and little kids love books, so that's easy. I didn't have to get them to be interested in books. Then I moved to a public library when I worked there for a lot of years, and again, that was easy. It's a public library. They're coming to us, they're obviously readers, so they're going to want to read books. Then I moved from public libraries into selling books. So again, I'm going into schools and I'm working with librarians, and they are wanting to buy books because their children are reading books. And the first company I worked for, we didn't have a shop front. We dealt directly with schools and libraries, so I was only dealing with those people. But for the past 10 years, I've worked in a bookshop where we do have a retail front. I do have the general public coming in. And the other part of my job that is becoming increasingly popular and more in demand, and the part that I enjoy most of all, is that I get to go out to schools in the idea that I'm selling books, but I get to talk to the kids. So whether it's a school that's got, a year 6, 7 class where the kids hate to read, or there's nothing good in our library, it's boring. So my job then is to go in, take the books that I love, talk about the books that I love, and again, hopefully get those books in those kids' hands. And one of the questions I always ask at the start is, who here likes to read for fun? Hands go up. Who here doesn't like to read for fun? And they're always a bit hesitant, like, oh, and I'm like, no, put up your hand. If you don't like to read for fun, that's the point. I'm here to change that. If I can help get that book into their hands, then that's the best part of my job. One of the things that I've learned as a reader is that when I was younger and I would read a book, I would think that I had to finish that book, whether I liked it or not. And the whole point of me, I guess, being there is to talk about reading for the love of it. If you are not having fun while you're reading that book, don't keep reading that book. Maybe stop at a particular point, put it to the side, you might go back to it, it might be something that you'll want to read later, but try something else. And that's the beauty of school libraries and public libraries, because you can keep trying and you don't have to read the whole thing. But when you do find the book that you want to read, it won't be hard and it will be fun, and that is the one that you want to keep reading.
During the Adelaide Writers' Week Festival, I was so fortunate to meet with beloved children's author Jackie French, and she told me about her reading life, some of her strengths and struggles, some of the books that she loves, and she shared a couple of her books with me. And now here's a sneak peek of what's to come on the next Writers' Read podcast.
There's one that turned me into a reader, and I loved it. Grandma read it to me, and I still remember the beginning. It was about the battle between a cat and a mouse. and I just loved it. But because I'm dyslexic, I learned to read in a very different way from the way most people read. But I always had books, and so many books changed my life.
When I met Jackie French, I was a little bit like a deer in the headlights. It was kind of like meeting your favourite rock star. But what I found was she was so generous and giving with her time, and she had so much that she wanted to share, not just with me, but the listeners and students that she knew that this podcast would reach. I don't know how Rebecca's going to do it, because Jackie French has written over 140 books. It will be really interesting to see what Rebecca comes up with in her Rebecca Recommends segment. All this on the next Writers Read podcast.
Writers Read by Litracey. Getting that book in children's hands. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Writers Read by Litracey, a Dave and the Beanstalk production.